Goya will also create this massive canvas known as the 3rd of May. And what we're seeing here is the aftermath of a historical event. So after a Spanish attack on the occupying French troops, the French will retaliate. In typical French form, they do so by massacring civilians, although the civilians are all unarmed. And what we're seeing here is an anonymous wall of French troops who are executing unarmed Spanish peasants. So let's dig into this a little bit more. We have the man in white in the front. He exists to develop a sense of empathy for the Spanish peasants. How? Well, one of the ways that he does this is going to be through that little mark in the hand. It's very reminiscent of the stigmata. And his pose is very reminiscent of the crucifixion, which of course we see here. A man who is innocent, who is being crucified for something that is being laid at his feet. The emotional drama is heightened through the stark use of light and shadow. He's using light very carefully here. So what are we really seeing? I mean, at one level, this is the resistance and patriotism of the Spanish. But it goes deeper because he wants to personify that suffering. He wants you to relate to it. And how do we relate to suffering? Well, let's look at the Spanish for a moment. Bring up my pen. We see dead civilians on the side telling us that this has been going on for a while. Then the people who are brought before this wall of soldiers over here, none of which have a face. It's a faceless group of armed mercenaries. It's death. By making them faceless, they become something else. They become the personification of impending doom and demise. Here we see the first line of Spanish peasants who are being brought before the firing squad, or the next line. Each of them reacting differently to what's going on. We have the man who has been the focus of our discussion in the white and yellow in the front, showing us a sense of innocence, a sense that he has nothing to do with anything that happened, but he will die because of it. Doesn't matter how innocent he is. But then we have other figures. We have what appears to be a monk who is putting his faith in prayer. We have a man who is proud and stoic, looking death in the eye. We have others who are hiding from it, or perhaps crouching behind other figures. These are all reactions people have to death. That moment when you know it's about to happen. The gun is about to go off. You've already slipped off the cliff and you have that moment to think about what's about to happen. That's what we're seeing here. Those are the peasants. And we can put ourselves in each of those positions. You might think that you're someone who's going to fight back against the armed man, but in the moment, will you be? Or will you be praying or stoic or hiding? It really makes you question where you would be on this spectrum. But then he goes one step further. We see the long line of people coming up from the village to be killed. And we see those reactions as people get closer. People covering their faces, or simply mournful, or simply cold, or possibly cold. All sorts of different emotional reactions. The focus here is on the psychology and the emotion, not the event. We know it's going to happen. We know they're going to die. Instead, he wants us to focus on how these people go to their death. What are they like? Because we know how they're going to end up. They're going to end up here, in a big pile. And he does something else interesting. You see this yellow box right here. This is an early depiction of what might be called a limelight or a chemical light. If you light certain things on fire, they would be very, very bright. Now, in reality, the French troops would not have a fancy light that they have out there. While they're killing people, it calls attention to it. It's simply unnecessary. You can just have a bonfire and shoot them. But for Goya's purposes, he needs a really bright light to focus us on these peasants over here so that we don't start to identify with the soldiers. And you could imagine a situation, if we could see the faces of the soldiers, we might start to identify with them. We might go, hey, they're just doing their job. They have no choice. But he doesn't want that, so they remain anonymous, faceless, only their backs towards the viewer. So the whole thing is deeper than simply one historical event. It's really about the human condition and condensing it into this one moment. What would you do when your death was on the horizon?